Okay, so in today's setup guide, I'm going to be showing you how to install a Workbench 3.1 inside of WinUAE. So I'm going to go through the complete process of this installation using WinUAE. Don't let WinUAE freak you out. I'm going to make this setup guide as simple as possible. And then once we're done with this, I'm also going to be showing you how to run ADF games as well as multiple disc Amiga games. I'm also going to be going through other settings such as how to configure controllers once you're playing games inside of WinUAE, and there's a lot of information in this one. So if you want a real ultimate Commodore Amiga experience using WinUAE, check this one out. Okay, before I start today's setup guide for WinUAE and Workbench 3.1 install, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Helps my channel a great deal, plus it gets you retro emulation content as I release it. So we're looking at WinUAE today. Now don't let this freak you out. A lot of people think WinUAE is fairly complex. I'm going to make this setup guide as simplified as possible. So prerequisites, we're going to need a Kickstart ROM, which is going to be 3.1, that's the A1200 version, and we're also going to need 6 ADF Workbench files, but I'm going to go through that with you as we go on. So first thing we're going to need to do is actually download the latest version of the WinUAE Emulator first. So we're going to go over to the WinUAE Amiga Emulator website and we're going to download the latest version of this. And I'm going to download the 64-bit installer for this. We've also got a 32-bit installer. Now, if you're confused on which one to actually download, very simple. You just go to your search and very quickly type in system information. You're going to find out what type of computer you're running. So as we can see, I've got times 64. If yours says times 86, then it's very likely you'll need to download the installer 32-bit version. I'm running a 64-bit, so I'm going to download the installer 64-bit. Okay, so once you've downloaded your installer, we're going to start setting up WinUAE. So here we go. We're going to go to next. And your next option is going to be where you want WinUAE to actually install. Now, I'm going to leave this as standard. And as we can see under location, it's going to go into my C drive, into my program files folder, and it's going to create a new folder called WinUAE. If you want this to go somewhere else, then just simply go to browse and then just navigate to where you want WinUAE to install. Like I say, I'm going to leave this as default. I'm going to go to next and then simply press on install. Okay, so we're now going to press on finish. And here we go. So we have now got WinUAE installed. So if I just open up WinUAE, it's going to warn us one of the following expansion boot ROMs is required. Check the system ROM path. Okay. And it's also going to give us another little hint that one of the following system ROMs is required. So we got 3.1, 3.1, 3.1, and 3.0. So we're going to sort that out in a minute if we just press on OK. And here we go. So this is WinUAE, and yes, it looks pretty complicated, but the point of this video is for me to help you. So let's go through this step by step. What we're going to do first is just make sure we're on Quick Start at the top just here. And we're going to go over to model, and if we just drop this down, we're going to select A1200. And it's going to give us another warning again that certain Kickstart ROM files are required. That's okay. Okay, next thing we're going to do is just go under hardware, and it says CPU and FPU. If you just left click on this, first of all, under CPU emulation speed, I'm going to just check on fastest possible. Under CPU, this is going to stay at 68020. Everything else can remain the same. Okay, next up we're going to go to CD and hard drives, and from here I'm going to click on add directory or archive. I'm going to call this device name DH0, and volume label I'm going to just call this one 3.1. And for the path of this, I'm going to put this into my work. So in my case, I'm going to drop it down to C drive users, Jamie desktop, WinUAE work. Let's just select this one and OK. Next thing we need to do is actually insert the install disk for Workbench 3.1. So if you just go down to floppy devices, make sure DF0 is checked. And if we just go over to the right, you're going to find a little button there with 3 dots on it. If you click on there, we then need to find the install ADF disk. So I'll put these into a dedicated folder on my desktop, and I'm just going to select disk 1 of 6, which is my ADF install disk for Workbench version 3.1. So this is now inserted. So next thing I'm going to do is just go to configurations at the top. Now you're not going to see game base, Mega AGS or Amiga 3. That's separate setup guides I've done. What we're going to do is create a new save for this. So under name, I'm just going to call this one 3.1. That'll be fine. You can call that whatever you want. And I'm then going to go to save. And there we go. So we've now got 3.1 saved, and that's going to be the file for this setup. Okay, so once you've saved that, we're simply going to start. So if we press start at the bottom there. Okay, and here we are. We are now in Workbench. Okay, so once we're inside a Workbench, you're going to find that you can't use your cursor outside of this. So in order to use your cursor outside, it's trapped. So if you just press Alt and tap on your keyboard, we can then come out just like so. And something else just to make you aware of, by pressing F12, we can then go back to the WinUAE interface. But I'm not going to do that now. To actually go through installing 3.1. So I'm going to double left click on install 3.1. I'm going to go to install. Now I'm going to install English. If you're using another language or you speak another language, then obviously select another one of these. I'm going to go with English, double left click. And this program lets you install release 3.1 of the Amiga operating system on hard drive. So what I'm going to do is just continue and press on proceed. And I'm going to go to install release 3.1. And I'm going to leave installation mode here as novice user. And I'm going to go with proceed with install. Which languages should be installed? I'm going to just leave English checked. Again, if you speak another language or you want this in a different language, select the appropriate one. English for me and proceed. I'm not going to bother installing any printing drivers, so I'm going to just leave all these unchecked and continue with proceed. Which key map should be installed? In my case, I want a British key map installed. If you want another one, then select the relevant one. Press proceed. Working on installation. Okay, so next up we're going to get please insert the Amiga Workbench disk version 3.1 in any floppy drive. So what we're going to do here is what I mentioned just now. By pressing F12, you can actually go back to the WinUAE interface. And from here, what I'm going to do is just go up to floppy drives. Okay, so what we're going to do is just select our Workbench ADF file, which is disk 2. Now, if I go back to the horizontal lines just here, I'm going to select Workbench, and I'm going to press on OK. Then once that's been inserted, as we can see after pressing proceed, it's now doing its thing. Okay, next up is asking us to insert our Amiga local disk. So again, what we're going to do here is just press 12. And we're now going to replace DF0 with the local. So this is going to be, in my case, disk 5 or 6. And press on it. And we're going to go to proceed. And next up, we have got insert Amiga extra. So again, and we're now going to find the extras ADF, which is in my case 3 of 6. And proceed. Next up, it's asking us to insert Amiga storage. So again, F and back to DF0, and I'm going to select my storage ADF and proceed. And next up, we got Amiga install. So and we're going to look for that install ADF and OK and proceed. And if you should keep getting this, please insert correct disk. Just means that I'm doing this too quick and WinUAE is just catching up. So finally, it's asking us to remove the Amiga install disk. So 12. And under floppy drives, I'm going to just eject the F0 drive. And what we're going to do next is just go over to configurations, and obviously under the 3.1 file name that I called this, I'm going to save it. Now once you've saved this, I'm going to go to Workbench and I'm going to press on proceed. And that's it. We're now into Workbench 3.1 and this is now installed. Okay, so now we completely got Amiga Workbench 3.1 installed, you might want to be playing some games. So all we need to do then to do this the traditional way, and this is going to be running ADF games, is by pressing. What we can do from here is just go down to floppy drives. Okay, so for this I'm going to be using Cannon Fodder 2. Cannon Fodder 2 obviously comes with 3 floppy disks. So what we're going to do in the WinUAE interface just here is go to floppy drives, and we can just use DF0, and then once it prompts us for disk 2 or disk 3, we got the choice of coming back to WinUAE and inserting disk 2, disk 3. But we can also enable DF1 and DF2, so we've got 3 floppy drives active there. So the choice is yours. So what I'm going to do here is just make sure DF0, DF1 and DF2 are checked, and I'm going to insert my Cannon Fodder 2 disks. So DF0, I'm going to look for my Cannon Fodder game, so I'm going to obviously insert disk 1 of 3 first. And if I go to DF1, I'm then going to insert disk 2 of 3, and under DF2, I'm going to select my Cannon Fodder 2 disk 3 of 3. So once you've done this, what we're going to do is just hit on reset. And to come out of that, I've just pressed escape on my keyboard. Okay, one thing we can also do, which I haven't mentioned yet, is by pressing F12 to come back into WinUAE, if we go to display, we can actually turn this into full screen. So if we go to settings and select full screen, we also got the choice here of putting full screen at the top to say 1920 by 1080. And again, I'm going to go to OK. Okay, so obviously Cannon Fodder 2 is operated by using a mouse, and that's what I was just using to play that. So next up, I'm going to show you how to actually configure your controller. So for this, I'm going to use the recently released Stuntman Seymour, which was long lost in the early 90s. I actually did a video on this game a little while back. So what I'm going to do is go to floppy drives again, and this time I'm going to eject my Cannon Fodder discs. Now, this game, Stuntman Seymour, it's a single disc only, so very simple to set this one up. So I'm just going to use DF0, and again, if I go over to that button, which is the horizontal three dots just there, I'm then going to select my Stuntman Seymour game. Now that's now inserted. So what I'm going to do next, I'm using an Xbox Bluetooth controller. What I'm going to do is go to game ports just here, which is under host, and port 2 is currently set to keyboard layout. So my Xbox controller is a Bluetooth, and I'm going to select this from here, Bluetooth X input compatible input device, and I'm going to use port 1 as the Windows mouse. As we know, some Amiga games is going to require a left click now and again to actually get into certain games. Now, some games for Amiga are going to work from port 1 or port 2. Most Amiga games, controller-wise, they work from port 2. However, underneath this, we got swap ports. As we can see by pressing this, my Bluetooth controller is now swapped to port 1. I'm going to leave this to port 2, and with my game now inserted, I'm going to go to and that's working just fine with my Xbox controller now connected. So obviously, if you want to go back into Workbench 3.1, then all we need to do is just make sure that no games are inserted. So just uncheck DF0, and if we go to reset, we're now back into Workbench 3.1. Now we're in 3.1, we got lots of things to play with just here. If we go into System, we got different applications there to use. If we go into Tools, again, we've got more applications to use. And that's it for today's Amiga WinUAE Workbench 3.1 setup guide. It's quite common for things not to work from time to time. Just make sure that you're following each step that I showed you in this video, and it should work. I'm also going to point out that if you want Kickstart ROMs, then just visit Amiga Forever and you can actually purchase them legally through Amiga Forever. So I've not actually uploaded a WinUAE setup guide for a long time, probably around 10 months I last did a WinUAE guide, in which I just showed the very basics of just actually playing games. So this is actually my first time giving a setup guide for installing Workbench. Anyways, if you like today's guide, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Also helps up my channel a great deal, plus it gets you up-to-date retro emulation content as I release it. And if you're interested in Amiga emulation, I've done a lot of Amiga emulation videos in the past, including the Denise emulator for Amiga. I've also done a couple of guides on the fork of WinUAE, which is FSUAE. I've also done Raspberry Pi Amiga setup guides, so be sure to check those out. Anyways, join me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And I'm always asking for small donations for the time and effort I put into my setup guides. So if it's £1 or $1, every little helps and it just enhances my channel so we can get bigger and better. So anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time, stay retro.